Welcome to The World Today. I'm Waqas Majeed. Today we are talking about the ongoing tussle between the US and Pakistani administrations, where Pakistan-US relations are headed, travel bans on diplomats, a tit-for-tat response. Any way to put the relations back on track, that will be our first topic of discussion. We hope that Pakistan and the US can mend their fences, because it is detrimental to both their interests to be not talking to each other. That seems to be the case at the moment, but we hope that these relations will improve in the coming days and weeks. Our second topic is, unfortunately, the use of Afghan soil against Pakistan. Another incident, according to news reports, there has been an attack from the Afghan side. The terrorists escaped back into Afghanistan after this cowardly attack. We will be talking about that also in detail. Let's begin our conversation. I'd like to introduce guests in the studio. Joining me for the conversation today, first of all, we have Yasir Masood Saab. He's an academic and a regular on our show. And we also have Javeed Rana Saab, who's a journalist, another regular. Thank you very much, sir, for being here. Let's start with you, Yasir. Where do you see the trajectory of the Pakistan-US equation heading? Because a number of decisions that have been taken by President Trump in recent weeks, they seem to point towards a very deep-rooted antagonism towards the entire Muslim world, it seems, because especially if you look at the decisions he's taken in Palestine, moving the embassy, and then again, when it comes to dealing with Pakistan, trying to make Pakistan a scapegoat for all their policy failures and blunders in Afghanistan, it doesn't seem like a rosy picture. What do you think things are heading?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Waqas, it's been going on for quite some time now. I would go back to the time since Donald Trump came into power. And it started basically documented right from the time when there was a review of their first foreign policy in August last year, when there was black and white allegation against Pakistan that America is pouring in huge funds of money for Pakistan, but still Pakistan is harboring terrorists and extremists. So since then, the relations have taken, it's like roller coaster movements we are facing and feeling since that time. And then again, there was a clear accusation against Pakistan in December last year in their first national security review. And since then, it's like there is, it seems like there is never-ending, things are emanating from the U.S. administration. And then the popular the popular tweet at the dawn of this year on 1st of January, and then inclusion of Pakistan into the grey list. So there are so many events and incidents which are sporadically which are occurring against Pakistan, and Pakistan has taken very calmly all these allegations and accusations. Pakistan reiterated its point that we are fighting against the terrorists. We have so many sacrifices against war on extremism and terrorism, and the whole world is witness to the fact. And especially, since the time, now the point is that why it is happening over and over again, why Pakistan is being pressurized against all these achievements and successes against the extremists and terrorists. Because you see that more than 90% of militants and their outfits have been eliminated by Pakistan on our side. But as you just mentioned in your comment, that it's basically reflective of their own failures and of their own fiasco which is happening in Afghanistan. Why they are pressurizing Pakistan and making Pakistan as a scapegoat, there is a rationale behind it. Because as a matter of fact, Americans know that the way out for America is Pakistan. But the problem is that the execution of that is totally wrong, because instead of appreciating, instead of cooperating, because you see somewhere down the line, we have same objectives with the US. We are against the extremists and terrorists and militant outfits, and if they say that they are their presence in Afghanistan is particularly for the same purpose, which we don't see, because we have witnessed that US is fueling and funneling more extremism and terrorism over there, as by the faction of Daesh and all that. So it seems a sort of juxtaposition between the interest, because on our side we are doing our best, and then Afghanistan is creating more hurdles and more problems for Pakistan, because the blame game rhetoric, it's never going to end. And on top of that, US is creating more problem, is creating more pressure for Pakistan. It will not work this way, because we have to cooperate, we have to coordinate with each other if we want to end this menace for good. If this is the mechanism, if this is the way the US is dealing with Pakistan, and for the first time I would say that Pakistan has responded in a very, in the same coins, because up till now we have, as I mentioned, that we have been responding in a very sagacious, in a very sane manner towards US. But if that is the way out, then I mean there is a somewhere between down the line we have to draw a line as well for ourselves, that
Right.
enough is enough.
So do you think that the line has been drawn? Rana sir, what's your opinion on the matter? Do you think that there is some way that we can rescue the deteriorating state of Pakistan-US relations, or do you think that it's already too late now? Whatever, the water has flown under the bridge, and now we need to look at other partners within the region and beyond. As far as America and Pakistan's relationship is concerned, it's more of a matter of a sort of a dead duck. What do you say?
I think since August last year, when the President Donald Trump issued a warning to Pakistan that Pakistan should be ready to face consequences, since then onwards, our response, official response, has been very measured, very calculated. We did not use the same tenon and kind of the language that he was using. We did not respond in that language. And even Pakistan cooperated with them, handed over some militants secretly behind the scene. And then after a few months, we made it public. Nonetheless, the relationship were not restored, and the pressure was there. And what Americans did afterwards, they asked Pakistan to give more visas to their so-called diplomats. And that is where the real fault is, because Pakistani security forces suspected that they are basically trying to send spies under the cover of diplomats. And we had terrible incident back in 2011 when one of the spy contractor had killed 2 Pakistani citizens in 2011.
Of course, you're referring to the Raymond Davis
Raymond
affair.
Davis. So,
but I'm sorry to interrupt you here, but have you also seen the reports in the press that are saying that authorities stopped Mr. Hale from going back on a plane that was sent from Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan to ferry him out of Pakistan, and that was foiled by the Pakistani authorities?
that is where the point I want to make.
Please.
Now, since then onwards, there have been the lingering problem between Pakistan and the US. They wanted more visas they want to basically expand their embassy. And remember, US embassy in Islamabad is the second biggest after Baghdad. This is the huge diplomatic presence in Pakistan. So Pakistan has been resisting that pressure. Pakistan has not issued them visas, which were suspected. And then Pakistan also came up with little more scrutiny of what kind of equipments they are sending to Pakistan. Those were being screened out at the airport, and that did not please Americans. So then they said, you are restricting our movement, there is a problem. This is not Jalam Sharaf Zira. This is a different picture now in Pakistan. And then they decided to restrict the movement of Pakistani diplomats in Washington. In a retaliation, then Pakistan had to take a similar measure. Now the point I'm trying to make is, again, at the heart of the entire problem is Afghanistan. And they are pushing Pakistan to a point where they believe they might be able to pressurize Pakistan to a point where they can produce Afghan Taliban, and they would negotiate with the Americans or the government in Kabul, and they would hand over the entire area, which is an independent analyst says 70%.
Right.
They admit it is close to 50%. Entire area to the Americans. This is not going to happen. The gains that Afghan Taliban have made inside Afghanistan, the territorial gain, they are not going to hand those gains to the Americans or the government in Kabul. This is clear. And I think there has to be clear realization within the Americans, and probably they would have, but there is a there is a policy of President Donald Trump, and that policy doesn't listen much to the logic. And they think they can bully everybody. They have been behaving, even with the Europeans, in somewhat in a similar manners. And in Afghanistan, the situation is very different. Pakistan's official policy stance is, which is very logical, that we do not control Afghan Taliban. They listen to us. And I would say they are no longer listening to Pakistan as much as they used to listen to Pakistan. Yes. Because Iranian influence on Afghan Taliban is there. Remember, just...
But I want to draw your attention to the National Security Advisor, Mr. Janjua's statement in the press recently. He said that on the one hand, the Americans keep asking us to do more, and they're saying that we are siding with the Taliban, whereas the Taliban are accusing us of siding with the West and being under American influence. So where are we supposed to go when both the parties are accusing us of being on the other side? So is there any logical explanation for that?
You see, we have already huge troubles from a Pakistani brand of Taliban. Just imagine if Afghan Taliban turn their gun against Pakistan. Can we handle that kind of situation?
I'm sure we can.
I'm sure this situation would not arise.
Right.
And Pakistan, I think, is exercising very caution. They don't want to, I mean, if they expect from Pakistan that they would go inside Afghan territory and they would kill Afghan Taliban, that's not going to happen.
That is not on our agenda.
That is not on our agenda. And I think Pakistan military has made it clear that we are no longer ready to fight a war which was imposed on Pakistan. Now there is a greater realization. I wish that would have happened years ago. We probably would have in a better position. The bargaining chip of Pakistan to negotiate with Americans has been very down. Americans are trying to negotiate with Pakistan as if General Musharraf is still there. The message which is being sent out from Islamabad to Washington that things have undergone a lot of changes.
It's no longer business as usual.
Yes, their espionage operation has been contained. And Pakistan, in an official statement, in official communication, have informed them that no longer we are going to allow you to use private residence, which the statement virtually means for espionage operation. You will have to seek operation if you have to install radio communication devices over there. And all those devices have to be, to begin with, screened at the airport. And that is the real trouble.
And that is totally Pakistan's prerogative of what they allow to be brought into the country or not.
And they're using multiple visas, multiple passports. For what?
Right. All right, let's go back into the historical perspective a little bit. Yasir, whenever we've talked about Pakistan-US relations, we saw that during the democratic government dispensation, Pakistan was slightly in the doghouse as far as US relations were concerned, but it was the Republican Party which always had great relations with Pakistan, despite all the rhetoric. Republican Party government has had a good working relationship with Pakistan. But this time it seems to be more of the same, because we didn't have much truck with Mr. Obama. He barely acknowledged Pakistan in many cases, or he did not have much to say about. But Mr. Trump has carried on in this perspective with the Obama administration era's policies towards Pakistan. Here we have some commonality when Mr. Trump is actually going out of his way to do away with all of Mr. Obama's policy successes, such as the health bill, the Iran nuclear deal, the climate change accord, the free trade accord with the European countries. So where are we headed with this sort of a relationship? Because it's very confusing.
Well, Waqas, first thing we have to keep it in mind that with US we always had different modes of relationship, I would say. We had transactional relations with them, we had need-based relations with them, and we had historical relations with them since the time of our inception. And as I mentioned in my previous comment that we had roller coaster moments. Despite all the differences, we managed to carry on this relationship up till now. And when I say that we had need-based relationship, still we have, we need each other, especially whether in the context of Afghanistan or in many other issues. We have so many commonalities. Now when we talk about relationships, I would go back to the time of Obama administration. that the decision was more or less made that in 2014 they would be able to retreat all the forces from Afghanistan, but it didn't happen. And there could be multiple reasons behind it. But the question is that it's a clear-cut failure in a sense that the longest war of US history in Afghanistan, since 16 years on in Afghanistan, but we do not find any outcome. And this is creating a sort of, US has reached to a point that it seems perplexed that what to do more. And I would connect with your previous question that it's not about Afghanistan alone. There are other dimensions to pressurizing Pakistan. And I would say that Pakistan has remained under the fold of geostrategic policies for a very long time. And which has never paid off. And US has been the master of those policies, and we remained under that. I won't go into the logic that why we remained under that. Either we were compelled, either we didn't have any other choices. But it was for the first time that because of the Chinese, we are able to
get out of the American
influence, and we have shifted this paradigm. I would call it a paradigm shift from geostrategic policies to geo-economic realities. And in this multipolar world order, it has been witnessed all over the world that many countries, they have progressed, they have achieved prosperity by realizing these geo-economic realities. So this is also like a problem for the US, that why Pakistan is on the right track. So these are also some of the tactics that they want to pressurize Pakistan, because Pakistan has, is embracing China for their policies because of CPAC as well.
But despite that, Yasir Saab, America is still one of the largest trading partners of Pakistan. Number one, I think, export destination for Pakistan is European Union and the US, because we do a lot of our textiles are exported to the US. They are in fact, I think they are the largest business partner right now that Pakistan has, if I'm not wrong.
United States of America consider itself as the policeman of the world and still a hegemon of the world. One of the problem is that whatever is happening all over the world, including Pakistan, including Iranian nuclear deal or elsewhere, the policy basically it indicates that it seems like this reign of power, this hegemony is slipping out of US's hands, and they want to regain that power. And by doing this, they believe that these Muslim countries are probably, they are subordinating states of the United States of America. So the way they are dealing us, and including the other Muslim countries, as they will rule us by injecting these kind of policies, which they have done in other parts of the world, including in the Arab world. So they want to still engage and inject those kind of disintegrating policies into this region as well, which has never boded well for South Asian region. If they continue and carry on with this kind of policies, that they will be creating rifts and conflicts among the states, because you see on paper, US has done nothing to create to fill that gap between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and likewise between India and Pakistan. If US is so sincere about the peace and prosperity of this region, the basic ingredients would be that they should play a very proactive and positive role.
Or at least a neutral role.
A neutral role.
We are not
US
seeing
is not
that
playing
either.
a very good.
We are seeing that they're completely biased towards India.
Towards India, and then instead of appreciating our role, because we are the state under the sun which has been inflicted by the terrorism, and then we came out of it unilaterally, I would say, and instead of appreciating that we have achieved this mammoth task, they should cooperate with us. The things are happening the other way around.
Maybe that's the problem, really. If you just maybe identified the problem, that we've done too good a job in eliminating terrorism, and that doesn't bode well for the Americans. Do you think that perception carries some weight? If that's one half of the question, the other half really is the important one. How can we mend our fences? Rana Saab, is there any way that we can get back to a relationship with the US, which is more of a relationship of respect and can't be equality? They are a superpower, we are a very small nation. So, but there should be some dignity and respect when nations deal with each other, whether it's small or big.
Let me address your second part of the question. I think Pakistan should not, and they have not undertaken any offensive posturing towards US. our response has been very measured, very calculated. We are reacting to what Americans are doing. We are not demonstrating any offensive posturing in our diplomacy or otherwise. Now, there is a perception now that we don't know for how many months, how many years the President Donald Trump is going to stay in power, because he's already embroiled in a lot of domestic controversies over there. His mindset, his approach dealing with foreign policy is the same. It is applicable by and large against other countries as well. So
there are only two countries right now that seem to be in Mr. Trump's good books. That's India and Israel.
Exactly. And I think as the time passes, I hope the Americans would have a greater realization that Pakistan's role in terms of Afghan Taliban, that is quite limited. No longer Pakistan has that kind of influence which used to be in the past. Situation has changed altogether. And I think President Donald Trump, just a few days back in his official statement while accusing Iran, also bracketed Afghan Taliban, that Iran is supporting Afghan Taliban. So they know it, that Pakistan is not the culprit as something they tried to portray back in August. Russians have been providing them weapons. Afghan Talibans are more active now in territories which is bordering with Central Asian states, which means the Russian probably are providing them all kind of weapons. And Afghan Talibans are also very active along with the borders, the western borders with Iran. And Mullah Akhtar Mansoor, you remember it, he was killed inside Pakistan territory while coming from Iran.
Right.
And the strategy of Afghan Taliban, which I know from different sources, that they actually, their leadership move around in the area, in the villages, remote villages of Iran. And from there, they operate. And from there, they've been, they're using this as a platform where they've been planning, and they've been attacking Afghan security forces. They've been attacking American soldiers. But remember, the very fact that they control, according to BBC, they have the influence and control over 70% territory. It's a huge territory, huge territorial control. That means the government inside Kabul, which is restricted to certain highways.
Well, we've seen recently the number of attacks that have taken place within Kabul. They really bring a huge question mark on the security apparatus that has been set up in Kabul. I mean, I don't understand what is NATO doing over there. I mean, if the number of attacks that have caused untold death and misery of the Afghan civilian population, what exactly are they doing?
The very trouble with the Americans is basically, they don't want to fight on the ground. When they were active in the battlefield, they were not fighting. And to be maybe your great surprise, the NATO forces, some of the countries, they were spying against Americans to Taliban when they were deployed in the east of Afghanistan. And the only condition was, don't attack on us. They were providing location about American soldiers. So that was actually their determination to what they call get rid of Afghan Taliban. In that kind of situation, obviously Afghan Talibans would make territorial grounds. Afghanistan is not Iraq. Afghanistan is not Syria. Geographically, it's a different territory. And I think in terms of ethnic population and also in sectarian angle, that is not there. There is one particular sect, which is Sunni sect. They hold the majority. And all this mountainous belt is supporting their insurgency, the guerrilla warfare. They have experience. They have fought with the former USSR. And from there onwards, they have a huge experience. They don't need Pakistan's support to train them because they are already trained. Colonel Imam, you might recall, he was killed by Pakistani Afghan Taliban. He told me that we don't need to train them. They are the master. He said, we are scared of the Americans, but they are not scared of the Americans. They are literally, I think they have the weapons, but they don't have those kind of facilities which Americans have. But nonetheless, they have determination to fight against American, which is largely perceived as an occupied force inside Afghanistan. And the kind of troubles that Americans are creating for Pakistan, that's hugely exaggerated. If you look at this long 25-kilometer long zigzag border with Afghanistan,
2,500
2500 kilometer long border.
Durand line.
Durand line. I mean, there are more than 400 informal routes. You can't stop people going back and forth. If you have your home on Pakistani side of the territory, then you have school on Afghan side of the territory, and vice versa. And I think in a broader picture, this insurgency will continue. Pakistan does not have control over Afghan Taliban, and more appropriate, let me say, Pakistan does not have control over the geography. That's a natural thing. That is giving a huge advantage to the Afghan Taliban. They will have more territorial gains in weeks and months to come. Americans have conducted more than 3,000 airstrikes during last 1 year.
According to the admission of many of their own generals and high-ranking security officials, they've already conceded that they've lost the war in Afghanistan.
Yes.
That has happened a number of times.
They need a face saving, and they want Pakistan to provide that face saving.
Well, that's not going to happen. Let's move on to the other part of our topic, and that is the use of Afghan soil against Pakistan. Now, we've seen recently an uptick of violence emanating from Afghanistan into Pakistan. Yasir, we've also seen the US veto a bill that Pakistan had raised in the United Nations to sanction the leader of the Jamaat al-Ahrar, which has caused devastating attacks, not just in Pakistan, but also in Afghanistan. And we still are sitting on that sanctions list, and the Americans blocked it. So what does that really show us about the intentions of the Americans in the region? And then secondly, what does it show when Ashraf Ghani talks about mending fences with Pakistan and trying to bring peace to the region? Are they just hollow words? And how can we bring some semblance of sense to what is happening?
Well, Waqas, we have seen these kinds of stances being emanating from Kabul administration many a times, where we have seen the two sides of the coin. One is that they want to cooperate with Pakistan, and Pakistan has been facilitating peace process for Taliban and all that. And the other side of the coin is the very dubious and a very bleak picture we see, that the moment we have some positive engagements with Afghanistan, and sooner or later you will see that things are happening, that the attack has been engineered in Afghanistan soil against Pakistan. Even yesterday, 7 Pakistani soldiers have.
Well, these are unconfirmed reports. We're not going to talk about the exact numbers, but we do know that there was an attack that took place.
There was an attack, but the point is that sporadic attacks have been emanating from Afghanistan soil, but the situation comes back to square one. The problem is that Afghanistan blame Pakistan for using sanctuaries, Taliban using sanctuaries in Pakistan, and we do the same, but we have the evidences. We have been providing evidences for each and every attack for quite some time now. But the question is that where it is leading the whole situation, because this blame game rhetoric, if we carry on with that, this is not a solution to all this issue. You see, the problem is that I would say that 2 things are very important in this context. One is that we have already started the fencing of the border. And the second is the repatriation of Afghan refugees from Pakistan. As far as fencing of the border is concerned, we have made a target of installing about 500 security checkposts by the end of this year. Now this fencing is in the interest of both Afghanistan and Pakistan. But you see, there is an accusation and there is a position of fencing of the border. When Afghanistan, the Kabul administration blames Pakistan for all this mess, then why it is in the interest of both countries? They should rather appreciate this fencing, but the thing is that they are not appreciating it. They are going opposite to this. Now, what is the US role? Because even this fencing is being done with the coordination and with the approval of both US and Kabul administration. But we see these kind of multi kind of responses from Kabul administration. What is the way out? When on 28th of February, when President Ashraf Ghani invited Taliban's for the peace process. The main agenda, the number one agenda was missing of in the dialogue, and that was because Taliban's, they want the exit of foreign troops from Afghanistan, and that particular agenda was missing. Without this, which is the nucleus of their whole concern, if it is missing, this would be just like a futile exercise. So until and unless both US and Afghanistan, if they don't take Taliban on board, and if they don't bring them on the peace process logically and positively, things would go in the same way. On part of us, we are facilitating, but then we have limitations. Until and unless Kabul administration is sincere and on board with all these factions, things would be in the same vein, I would say.
Rana, what's your opinion? How should Pakistan deal with these terrorist attacks on Pakistani soil, which has been planned and executed from Afghanistan, and then these cowardly attackers rush back into Afghanistan, into the sanctuaries that are being provided to them in Afghanistan? What are the Americans doing about those sanctuaries? What are they doing about the various terrorist outfits that are operating in Afghanistan? ISIS, Daesh, now we have Jamaat al-Ahrar. We have so many other splinter groups that are operating in Afghanistan with impunity and no real action on the ground against them.
I think Pakistan is fast losing decent options to get rid of the menace of this terrorism from Afghan side of the border. And in the past, there was some unconfirmed report which was suggesting that perhaps that Pakistani troops included inside Afghan territory to kill these terrorists. I think that kind of option may not be off the table in coming months. I don't want to use the words of years. Let's hope that doesn't happen. Because they've been attacking on Pakistani security forces, not only alongside the border region, but also across the country. Through using these informal routes at the Durand line, and they're coming in, sneaking into Pakistan, and then spreading across the country and attacking on our security forces. This is becoming a bigger problem. We have lost tens of thousands of civilians and the security personnel. Now the trouble is that if Pakistan go for some sort of surgical strikes, we have trouble with India because India has been blaming us similarly, and we don't want to set a precedent. So that is the reason that Pakistan is reluctant, and probably it would stay reluctant. And dispassionately speaking, because we have already been under the shade of allegations from the Americans, from the Kabul, that there are Afghan Taliban sanctuaries. So probably we would avoid it. We will try to handle it in a different manner, and that is that once these terrorists sneak inside Pakistan, we'll try to stop them at the borders through informal routes with a better intelligence network, and then with a better intelligence network to know more about their hideouts across Pakistan, particularly in the tribal region, and also partly in Karachi, because they did have their presence over there. Again, the point I'm trying to make is this is going to be a very difficult option for Pakistan to conduct surgical strikes. We need to be a little more alert. And if we provide intelligence to the Americans about the presence of Pakistani brand of Taliban inside Afghanistan territory, I don't think they are going to act. Kabul government, they have already admitted that we don't have our writ in the border region. I would say they don't have the writ anywhere in Afghanistan other than Kabul. Inside the Kabul, they don't have the writ. So Pakistan is in a helpless situation. We have tough policy choices to make.
Very, very sad situation now. If we also look at what's happening around in the region, that's also very important because it has a bearing impact on Pakistan. If we look at Mr. Trump walking out of the Iran deal recently, we've also heard newspaper reports of an escalation of violence in Syria as a result. We had reports of Israel attacking Iranian positions in Syria, and we have reports of the Iranians making some maneuvers around the Golan Heights. We also had Mr. Netanyahu visiting Mr. Putin while this was all happening. So if you look at what's happening around in the region, it's a very delicate situation, especially for Pakistan, because we neighbor Iran as well as Afghanistan, and we're stuck in a very hostile neighborhood. Yasir, what options does Pakistan really have to deal with this changing scenario within the region? What if the military aspect spirals out of control if it comes to Israel and Iran? What are we going to do?
Yes, even if, I would add one point to my colleague that even in terms of Afghanistan or whatever is happening between both countries, especially these sporadic attacks which are occurring from there. Now, one way out is that it's sort of a conundrum, and we definitely are stuck in a very difficult situation considering the fact that India is playing its role in Afghanistan, then US is further pressurizing Pakistan, and Afghanistan is not helping Pakistan either. So in that context, even we talk about Iran, you see we have to play a very, we have to chisel the skills of our foreign policy in a sense that in such and such situation, we have to use proactive diplomacy with Iran and with our regional borders and with our neighboring countries, because you see we have to create a win-win situation for both for our neighbors until and unless we go an extra mile to work on to sort out these issues, because the problem will be we will have to face this issue, we will have to face lots of problems. So in that context, I think so proactive diplomacy must be used. Back channel diplomacy can also be used in the context of Iran, because you see the regional scenario is on the move, and on every day things are happening, and it is dictated by the US, as we all know. So in that context, Pakistan has to play a very pivotal role, because the geographic location of Pakistan is very important. And then when we say that one rhetoric is that Pakistan has been unable to create a close coordination between the neighbors, so this is the time when we have to review our policies, we have to find out, we have to fill those gaps, and then we have to identify it. But identification would not only work, we have to execute and we have to work on them.
Absolutely. Rana Sahab, coming back to the use of Afghan soil against Pakistan, we've had the similar accusation tossed against Pakistan, that Pakistani soil is being used against Afghanistan. There are sanctuaries. Then a number of operations were undertaken by the Pakistani authorities. We cleared every single area. We pushed the terrorists out of Pakistani territory. Most of the Afghan Taliban are now back in Afghanistan. Again, we are now witnessing a reciprocal or reverse of the situation that Afghanistan was accusing us of, or the Americans have been accusing us of. Now that the situation has reversed, what actions are the Afghan government or the American government going to take in order to stop this infiltration of Afghan terrorists into Pakistan?
None. They have more focus on blaming Pakistan. All these kind of wild allegations, this will keep on happening in months and perhaps in years to come. The reason being is, the point I want to make is clear. Afghan government does not have control. US-led NATO doesn't have a control on much of Afghan territory. So the sanctuaries of Afghan Taliban are inside Afghanistan. I don't call it a sanctuaries because they have control.
It's their country, Rana Sahab.
This is their country.
Yeah.
This is their country, and they are resisting the occupying forces. That is a bitter fact. And the if we call them as terrorists, they may be terrorists, because some of them are involved in killing civilians. One cannot accept it. But if they are killing American soldiers, people would not call them terrorists.
Well, I'd like to jog your memory back to the time when right after 9/11, when the Americans came into Afghanistan, there was a great sense of hope in the Afghan people, because previously the Taliban government was seen as a repressive regime. It was a repressive government. The people were not all that. Of course, there must be a number of people who were happy with that arrangement, but there was also a large segment of society which was not happy, and therefore they did have the support of the Americans had the support of the Afghan population. But now that support has diminished, or it's almost non-existent for them. For the Afghan civilians, the American troops or the Afghan Taliban are one and the same, or they're two sides of the same coin for them, because both of them are killing Afghan civilians. How do we deal with this?
Let me put the record straight. It was a Northern Alliance headed by Abdullah and other warlords. They were against Afghan Taliban. That represent a part of the population of Afghanistan. During Afghan Taliban's regime, going by the UN report, the use of the drug and the presence of these all kind of poppy fields, that was almost close to zero.
It was zero.
It was zero. And now Afghanistan is the country which is providing the largest quantity of heroin and other all kind of illicit drugs to all over the world. And that is the great contribution of our so-called allies, American allies, inside Afghanistan. So let's be very straight.
Well, they did have the war on drugs before we had the war on terror, by the way.
Exactly.
So maybe there's a lesson to be learned
and
in there.
There was no suicide attacks in Pakistan other than few. I mean, there was one attack at Egyptian embassy in Islamabad.
Right.
I don't recall. So Americans has gifted us a lot of many things, and one of which is terrorism, and one of which is killing of innocent Pakistani civilians, tens of thousands. So I would say that we should not expect from Americans that they are going to attack Pakistani brand of Taliban inside Afghan territory. We have already seen American reactions at the UN. They are not going to list them as terrorists because it serves their geostrategic interest. Exactly. They think that by if there are more and more attacks on Pakistani security forces, more and more attacks on Pakistani civilian population, they can force and compel Pakistan to bring Afghan Taliban on negotiating table to win a war they have lost in the battlefield. So you see,
yes,
it's a media campaign that which they have launched against Pakistan. Everybody is parroting that Pakistan is supporting Afghan Taliban. What kind? I mean, they are exaggerating our capacity. Can we do it? 70% area is in the control of Afghan Taliban,
right?
And the credit is being given to Pakistan.
Well, we leave it at that, sir. We let the audience make up their minds as to what the reality on the ground is. But thank you so much for taking out the time and sharing your views with PTV World. Well, we always say that you may draw your own conclusions from what you've heard, but as we end the program, there's something that we'd like to also share with our audiences, that Faiz Ahmed Faiz's daughter, Muniza Hashmi, was invited to an event in India recently. Unfortunately, when she arrived there for the purpose of attending that event, the Indian government was extremely rude to her, and she was deported from India rather unceremoniously after being invited there to speak at a function. That just shows us the petty-minded and the level of pettiness that the Indian government has fallen to under the BJP Modi Sarkar regime, and it is a really sad statement on the way things are. On that note, it's goodbye.